Hello, everybody. My name is Mr. Stevens, and I am your teacher in English literature, and I'm also your guide as we explore the various literary forms within the Romantic period. Today, we are going to be exploring a poem entitled The Nightingale by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. And this poem is included in a collection by Dover of various other poems written by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. And so within this presentation, it's also going to be considered a read along because you're going to read along with me, and we are going to stop sometimes to check your comprehension and content enrichment so that you can gain a better understanding of what this poem is trying to communicate to the reader in a more formal and enriching setting. So, let us begin. So, a little author background, because every good reader knows that background is critical to understanding the vibrancy of the literature that they are being presented with. Context is critical, is something I always say, and something you should definitely take with you when reading other types of literature. So, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, born 72 to 1834, right in the heart of the Romantic period of literature. And I know you've heard this before, so I'm not going to completely go into it, but it is something to take in mind. English poet, literary critic, philosopher, and one of the founders of the Romantic movement in England. Since this isn't an English literature class, I know that you have heard of the Romantic movement before, where it places an emphasis on nature and the human emotion, but I'll talk about that more later. He's best known for The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, Kubla Khan, and Christabel. Classics, some of my absolute favorite poems from this era. Coleridge's poetry often blends deep philosophical reflection with vivid imagination and a love for nature, which are central themes to Romanticism. Coleridge struggled with health problems and a lifelong addiction to opium, which affected his creative output. But despite these struggles, his influence on English literature has been so profound, particularly through the uses of his ideas on imagination and literary criticism. So he is a monumental figure in the Romantic movement and the literature movement that went along with that. So big influence, and you're going to see that whenever we read this text. He also did a little bit of work in metaphysics, which is the understanding of the conscious mind and other such things, but it just further cemented his role in history. So, what is a nightingale? A very, very important aspect to learn before we read this poem. So, a nightingale is a small passerine bird renowned for its powerful and beautiful song, very complex whenever it sings. The bird's song is famously heard at night, although it also sings during the day, but the prevalence of night is going to be especially important in this poem. The nightingale's song has been a source of inspiration for poets, musicians, and writers for centuries, but mainly took effect during the Romantic period. Its melancholy and natural beauty. Now, we're going to talk about what melancholy is before we read the poem, because this is another important symbol and theme to understand before reading. The nightingale is also known for its distinct ability to produce a wide range of notes and intricate melodies. So once again, this is also going to play a very critical role in the poem. I want you to make note of this whenever we're talking about what a nightingale is. So melancholy, what is it? Melancholy is a recurrent theme in the Romantic and Gothic literature. For this sake, melancholy is a state of deep, often reflective sadness or sorrow, sometimes without a clear cause. It's more contemplative and less intense than a grief or despair mood, often involving quiet, self-analyzing mood. So it's basically you're in deep thought about an event or circumstance. It's not because you're grieving a lost loved one. It's simply you're analyzing your place in life. You're analyzing how you want to interact with life. So, let's jump into this poem because I am so ready to read along with you. Now, I'm going to read, and we're going to pause for comprehension checks occasionally. So, let us begin with the Nightingale. No cloud, no relic of the sunken day distinguishes the west. No long thin slip of sullen light, no obscure trembling hues. And I know we just started, but I'm going to pause there because we have a comprehension check. So, of that phrase that I just read to you, I want you to answer this question. Now, take out a piece of paper, open a Google Doc, and I want you to write down the answer to this question. How does Coleridge's depiction of the night sky, particularly the absence of light, set the tone for the poem and influence the reader's understanding of the relationship between nature and emotion? And so while you answer this question, I also just have a few vocabulary words here so that you can understand what you're reading in these couple lines of the poem. So relic is just a historic way to spell a relic. So an old thing, and like the ancient relics of Egypt. And then hues, which is just various shades of color, as red transitions to orange, orange to yellow, yellow to green. That's simply what a hue is. So I'm going to pause right here. I want you to answer this question to the best of your ability. Pay particular attention to the absence of light and what that plays and what the tone is for the rest of the poem. So go ahead and pause and we'll get right back into it. All right, so everyone has paused, so let's jump into it now. So my answer to this question is Coleridge begins by describing the night sky in a calm, peaceful setting. But whenever he discusses the absence of light, this reflects an emphasis of nighttime and nature. Now, what did we talk about before about the nightingale? It primarily sings at night. So we know that the nightingale is going to play a critical role into this peaceful setting of tranquility that Coleridge is writing within his poem. We understand that there is no obscure trembling hues. There is no disinformation, let's say. It's a symbol of mystery and melancholy. It's a symbol of deep reflection, and that's what the poem is about. The author and the reader engaging in deep reflection about the nightingale. And so that's basically what we're reading here. All right, excellent job on the first comprehension check. Let's finish the poem. Come, we will, rest on this old mossy bridge. You see the glimmer of the stream beneath, but hear no murmuring. It flows silently o'er its soft bed of verdure. All is still, a balmy night, and though the stars be dim, yet let us think upon the vernal showers that gladden the green earth, and we shall find a pleasure in the dimness of the stars. And hark, the nightingale begins its song. Most musical, most melancholy bird. A melancholy bird? Oh, idle thought! In nature there is nothing melancholy, but some night-wandering man whose heart was pierced with the remembrance of a grievous wrong, or a slow distemper of neglected love. And so, poor wretch, filled all things with himself, and made all gentle sounds tell black the tale of his own sorrow. He, such as he, first named these notes a melancholy strain, and many a poet echoes the conceit, poet who hath been building up the rhyme, when he had better far have stretched his limbs beside a brook in a mossy forest dell, by sun or moonlight to the influxes of shapes and sounds, and shifting elements, surrendering his whole spirit, of his song and of his fame forgetful, so his fame should share in nature's immortality. A venerable thing and so his song should make all nature lovelier, and itself be loved like nature. But 'twill not be so, and youths and maidens most poetical, who loose the deepening twilights of the spring, in ballrooms and hot theatres they still, full of meek sympathy, must heave their sighs o'er Philomea's pity-pleading strains. My friend and thou, our sister, we have learnt a different lore. We may not thus profane nature's sweet voice, always full of love and joyance. 'Tis the merry nightingale that crowds and hurries and participates. And so we're going to stop right there for another wonderful comprehension check. So, of that passage I just read, my friend and thou, our sister, we have learnt a different lore. We may not thus profane nature's sweet voices, always full of love and joyance. What a wonderful, wonderful way to start a new stanza. So, the question I want you to answer in this next comprehension check: how does the speaker in the stanza encourage a shift in perspective regarding the perception of nature, and what message does this convey about the relationship between human emotion and the natural world? Pay very close attention to the influence of the Romantic movement within this question to help you answer it. So, you can take a moment. Once again, vocabulary at the bottom. Lore, traditions typically held by a particular group of people. Profane is a not respectable attitude. Now, I want you to pay close attention to these vocabulary words when answering the question as well, because these vocabulary words, such as the profane, helps to answer the question about human emotion and its connection to the natural world. So how does this profane nature connect to a human's perception of nature? That's what I want you to discuss in this comprehension check. Remember to answer the question fully. There is no word count. I just want to see that you are understanding the text. So go ahead and pause, and we will move on and answer the question. All right, everyone, welcome back. So, my answer to the question, I would say that this stanza appeals to friends and loved ones. It starts with my friend and thou, our sister. It embraces that and encourages them to embrace a more positive view of nature. He's telling his friends that they have such a negative view on nature and that they should improve their mood, as nature is a lovely indulgence and it should be viewed as such. And so it emphasizes these sweet voices that are often misunderstood by nature. And I'm going to tell you that these sweet voices, if you haven't figured it out yet, are the voices of the nightingale. So whenever it discusses sweet voices and voices in general, the verbal within this poem, it's talking about the nightingale and its harmonious and melodious bird calls that it creates. So within this stanza, we can understand that Coleridge is telling the reader that humans have such a misunderstood view of nature. They view it as sorrowful, as a nuisance of the birds singing constantly at night, disturbing their sleep. But that is simply not the case. Nature is a pure substance, and it was our intent to exist in tangent with nature. However, that is not how the author views many of the people mentioned in his poem, his friend and his sister, his companions. He wants them to embrace nature as he does, with the respect that he has for the nightingale, which is this representation. And with that amazing comprehension check done, I'm sure all of you did excellent with your analysis of it. We are going to continue reading the poem, and keep advised there's going to be one more comprehension check. So, Let us continue. We'll just start from the beginning of this stanza because it helps to have a continuous flow. I know I'm stopping for comprehension checks, but let's start from the beginning of this new stanza. My friend and thou, our sister, we have learnt a different lore. We may not thus profane nature's sweet voices, always full of love and joyance. 'Tis the merry nightingale that crowds and hurries and precipitates with fast, thick warble his delicious notes, as he were fearful that an April night would be too short for him to utter forth his love chant, and disturb in his full soul of all its music. And I know a grove of large extent, hard by a castle huge, which the great lord inhabits not, and so this grove is wild with tangling underwood, and the trim walks are broken up, and grass thin grass, and king's cups grow within the paths. But never elsewhere in one place I knew so many nightingales, and far and near, in wood and thicket, over the wide grove, they answer and provoke each other's song, with skirmish and capricious passings, and murmurs musical and swift, jug, jug. And one low piping sound more sweet than all, stirring the air with such a harmony that you should close your eyes, you might almost forget it was not day, on moonlight bushes whose dewy leaflets are but half disclosed. You may perchance behold them on the twigs, their bright, bright eyes, their eyes both bright and full, glistening, while many a glowworm in the shade lights up her love torch. A most gentle maid who dwelleth in her hospitable home, hard by the castle, and at latest eve, even like a lady vowed and dedicate to something more than nature in the grove, glides through the pathways, she knows all their notes. That gentle maid, and oft a moment's space, what time the moon was lost behind a cloud, hath heard a pause of silence, till the moon, emerging, hath awakened earth and sky with one sensation, and those wakeful birds have all burst forth in choral minstrelsy, and, as if some gale had swept at once 100 airy harps, and she hath watched many a nightingale perch giddily on blossomly twig, still swing from the breeze, and to that motion tune his wanton song, like tipsy joy that reels with tossing head. Farewell, O warbler, till tomorrow eve, and you, my friends, farewell, a short farewell. We have been loitering long and pleasantly, and now for our dear homes that strain again. All right, we are going to pause here for our final comprehension check, and then we will continue with the rest of the poem, and we can get to discussing the themes and various symbols that are overarching within the poem that Coleridge tries to communicate to the reader. So, our final comprehension check is of I just read. Farewell, O warbler, till tomorrow eve, and you, my friends, farewell, a short farewell. We have been loitering long and pleasantly, and now for our dear homes that strain again. Full fain it would delay me, my dear babe, who capable of no articulate sound. All right, with those lines from the stanza, I want you to focus on this question, and this will help to wrap up the poem and expressively communicate Coleridge's theme to the reader, including yourself. So, how does Coleridge's farewell to the nightingale and his companions reflect the romantic ideals of nature, emotion, and childhood innocence, And what effect does the nightingale's song have on the speaker's actions and emotions? So, whenever we're talking about the romantic ideals, we're talking about this nature, we're talking about emotion, we're talking about the human consciousness. So, as discussed in Comprehension Check 1, we talked about the friends that the author is apparently writing to within this poem. So, how is he saying goodbye to his friends? I want you to think about how he introduced his friends before as doubters of the beauty of nature, how they don't believe humans have a rightful place in nature and it should be separate. They view it with a melancholy disposition. And now compare it to where we are now in the poem. How has the author's tone changed towards his friends and to the nightingale himself? Think about level of respect he has for perhaps both parties, or how the nightingale has influenced both of these persons. So some vocabulary. A warbler is a type of bird. In this context, it's a reference to the nightingale. And articulate, the ability to speak coherently, just as I am doing now, speaking coherently by describing this poem and these various comprehension checks to you. So, go ahead and pause, write down your response, and then we can jump right back into it, explaining the answer and finishing this wonderful poem. All right, welcome back. So, my answer, and I believe your answers because you're all doing so wonderful with these comprehension checks. When the speaker prepares to leave for home, the nightingale's song continues to call him back. It is so harmonious and melodious that he is in a trance with the nightingale. It is painful for him to leave the nightingale's calls. It would be such a strain again to say goodbye. And now, why do you think that the author is feeling this despair? Well, he says, till tomorrow eve. That means night is ending. And as we saw in the poem before, he mentions April being short nights. He finds such despair in waiting for the nightingale to come to him. And so saying goodbye is so difficult. The beauty of the nightingale's music is so captivating that the speaker does not wish to leave. Coleridge is embodying these romantic and powerful messages of nature and how it touches the human nature and the human heart. And that's what Coleridge is trying to communicate to the reader. All right, awesome, amazing job with these comprehension checks. You are totally understanding what the poem is about now, and you are on track to enriching your understanding of Coleridge, the Romantic movement, and the Nightingale poem. So truly an amazing job. And now let's finish with this poem so you can see how it ends. All right, let's begin at the stanza again, just for continuity of reading. Farewell, O warbler, till tomorrow eve, and you, my friends, farewell, a short farewell. We have been loitering long and pleasantly, and now for our dear homes that strain again. Full fain it would delay me, my dear babe, who, capable of no articulate sound, mars all things with his imitative lisp, and how he would place his hand beside his ear, his little hand, the small forefinger up, and bid us listen, and I deem it wise to make him nature's playmate. He knows well the evening star, and once, when he awoke, in most distressful mood, some inward pain, had made up that strange thing, an infant's dream. I hurried with him to our orchard plot, and he beheld the moon and hushed at once, suspends his sobs and laughs most silently, while his fair eyes that swarm with undropped tears did glitter in the yellow moonbeam. Well, it is a father's tale, but if that heaven should give me life, his childhood shall grow up, familiar with these songs, that with the night he may associate joy, Once more farewell, sweet nightingale. Once more, my friends, farewell. All right. I hope you enjoyed that poem as much as I did, because it is truly so amazing to think about the nightingale being this representation of a human connection with nature. By understanding and listening to its harmonious and beautiful bird calls that it does within the night, we are able to gain a better connection with nature through this poem, and a better understanding through Coleridge attempts to disassociate or dissent the information to the reader. So I'm a huge fan of Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and I encourage you to continue to read his poems, because they are so prevalent in the Romantic movement, and it's amazing to see his viewpoint of nature. So let's just go real quick. How does Coleridge use the nightingale? Coleridge uses the nightingale in his poetry to convey emotions and challenges that traditionally association of the bird with sorrow, instead of celebrating its joyful song. So that's what he was talking about to his friends before. They believe the bird is sorrowful, but instead it is such a joyful song that makes you appreciate nature. He uses the nightingale to highlight the importance of perceiving nature in its purest form. That's why he mentions about children, because they are innocent, and that's why he compares having a childlike nature to perceiving the nightingale as pure form, untainted by human sorrow and bias of what they believe the outside world is like. And finally, Coleridge's portrayal of the nightingale aligns with these romantic ideals that we have been talking about throughout the entirety of this poem and in this class of English literature. It's the power of imagination and the importance of emotional truth to the reader, understanding where they have come from and what lies ahead, understanding the importance of nature and the human connection to it. And so you'll have a copy of this poem to listen to what a nightingale sounds like. I very much encourage you to listen to it, because it is such a fascinating such a fascinating bird song to listen to, because of its high range of notes, and you can just see it so clearly, how it goes from a common bird song to almost a musical instrument, like it was in an orchestra. So thank you so much for sticking with me while we have read The Nightingale by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. And make sure that you submit those comprehension checks online to me. And I very much hope that you enjoyed reading this poem and it has sparked your interest in Romantic literature and to the various works of Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Thank you very much for listening, and have a pleasant day.